I'm Caleb Giddings, and welcome to the return of Gun Nuts Radio. For the longest time, I did a podcast. I would like to think I'm the hipster of gun podcasts because I did one before it was cool, before everyone else was doing them, and now everybody else has podcasts, and I don't do a podcast anymore. And I'm not really sure what the difference between a podcast and just talking to you guys in a video like I do pretty frequently is, but welcome. We're going to call it the format. So in the format of these Gun Nuts Radio episodes, which will be frequent-ish, but not replacing our regular gun-related content, we're going to focus on topics. Things like what's in the news lately, gun control, Benchmade, things like that. And the reason I want to do this is because a lot of times you'll have little things come up throughout the week that will get tied into a larger overarching issue, and if it's something that's worth addressing, we can do that. For example, this week on Gun Nuts Radio, we talk about Benchmade, Surefire, and outrage culture in the firearms industry. There's not going to be any sexy intro music or anything like that because that's just not my style, and it never has been. In each episode, we're going to wrap up with, I don't know, something gun-related, a training tip. We'll figure it out as we get there. Anyway, so let's kick this off. Benchmade and Surefire. If you have been living under a rock for the last week, Benchmade went and committed a great social media blunder and stepped on their dick. What happened was the Oregon City Police Department had some firearms that were required to be destroyed. And why were they required to be destroyed? They were either under a court order to destroy these firearms, or they had been turned in by a citizen who had requested their destruction. Now, in that situation, the OCPD has no choice but to comply and have these firearms destroyed. So, they took them literally across the street to Benchmade. And Benchmade said, sure, we'll cut these things up for you. They're scheduled to be destroyed. We don't, whatever. We're here to help. We want to help out our friendly neighborhood law enforcement agencies. All right. So Benchmade goes and they cut up these guns, and that would have been the end of it. Except Oregon City PD posted a photo of Benchmade cutting up these guns on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, one of the social media platforms, and it went viral faster than anything I've seen go viral recently. I don't think Benchmade did anything wrong. I really don't. I don't think that helping out your friendly neighborhood PD and cutting up guns that have to be destroyed is a wrong thing to do. Where I think Benchmade made a huge mistake is they should have known what those optics are going to be. They really should have. They should have known that you can't show gun owners a picture of a pro-Second Amendment company like Benchmade chopping up some frickin' guns. You can't do that. The optics on that are going to be terrible. And because the optics on that are going to be terrible, you should have had a strict no cameras, no photos, no tweets, no, smoke signals, a no nothing policy. None of this will ever escape from this room, not because I think they should hide their association with local police or hide that they're helping a local law enforcement agency, but because you should have understood what the optics on that were going to be, Benchmade. And you didn't. And you failed to control that, and here we are. Everybody hates you. Not everybody. I don't hate you. But a lot of people are very, very upset about this. And what then happened as a result of this is some dude living in his mother's basement with his fingers stained by Cheetos digs up Benchmade's donation history, their political donations, as if we give a crap about that. Well, the internet does give a crap about that, Caleb. So it turns out that Benchmade had donated to a couple of Democrats. Oh no, a Democrat. And the internet proceeded to continue to lose its mind about this, despite the fact that the Democrats that Benchmade had donated to were a couple of literally local dudes who actually didn't have a terrible record on the Second Amendment. Those donations were real upsetting to a lot of people. And that leads us to Surefire. Someone, again, probably some neckbeard living in his mother's basement with no social life or anything really good going on in his life. Like, what kind... I'm gonna pause button here and just like wonder, what kind of bum do you have to be where this is what you get off on, is digging up political donations from companies in the firearms industry? Like, what a loser. Anyway, so this loser digs up Surefire's political donations, and everyone flips out because there's donations to Democrats who are very anti-gun on this list. It got so bad that Surefire had to issue a statement about it, which I'm going to read to you because Surefire's statement is great. I think it makes perfect sense. And we're just going to pull this up here real quick and read what Surefire said. You guys ready for this? And this isn't from just like Surefire at all. This is from Dr. Matthews, the founder of Surefire. Dear customers and concerned citizens, it has been brought to our attention that past political donations from the Surefire Political Action Community, PAC, have been called into question along with Surefire's stance on the Second Amendment. Before we get to the facts, we'd like to thank you for your support, and we sincerely appreciate your loyalty. It's a long read, but the details should provide a fuller perspective. Established in 2010 and disbanded in 2014, the purpose of the Surefire PAC was to gain the support and assistance of our state representatives, both Democrat and Republican, so that we had a chance at 1, obtaining congressional funding to develop sighting technology that would improve the warfighter's ability to aim crew-served weapons, and 2, to be able to reach out to our representatives when we need assistance doing business in California. During its existence from 2010 to 2014, the Surefire PAC made donations totaling approximately $10,356 to Democrat representatives and $16,610 to Republican representatives. It should be noted that we were unsuccessful in obtaining congressional funding for our weapon sight development project mentioned above, and that all of our product development has been self-funded. But if you are a defense business that hopes to get a congressional budget earmarked funding and or program support for defense-related projects, you typically need to get the attention and support of at least one of your state representatives, or all of them if possible, so they can represent your interests during the budget appropriations process. This is how business is done in the defense industry by most medium-sized defense manufacturers and by all of the large ones. And it's what we needed to do to achieve our mission of ensuring the safety, success, and survival of our customers, whether military, law enforcement, or patriot citizen. In 2018, one of our employees donated $500 to the DNC Services Corp, a pro-Democrat organization. This was a personal donation and had nothing to do with Surefire, and despite the fact that we, as a company, are not aligned with his political preferences, we recognize his right to think differently and to vote as he pleases. The rest of it from Dr. Matthews is just affirming their support for the Second Amendment, etc., etc. But what's interesting about that is, again, the internet just flipped out. They're like, oh my gosh, Surefire donated to Dianne Feinstein. Well, yeah, they did, because that's, like they said, how you get the attention of your senators and representatives if you're trying to get a congressional earmark. And that's the way business is done in DC. Whether you like it or not, that's the way business is done. And what's interesting about this, and you can probably tell my thoughts on the sort of people who are outraged by this based on the living in their mom's basement comments and the Cheeto-stained fingers, but I would be willing to bet a considerable amount of my own money that the people who are really butthurt about Benchmade and Surefire donating money to Democrats don't own any Benchmade products and don't own any Surefire products. And they're just looking for something to be mad about. Because that's really what this podcast is about, is outrage culture. And outrage culture is a huge problem right now. And it's a huge problem on the left. And it's a huge problem on the right. You see it on the left when a 10-year-old tweet from someone will surface, and that person's TV show will be canceled because all of Twitter loses its mind and demands they be silenced. And you see it on the right when the same sort of people who make fun of the easily triggered liberal snowflakes get upset because Colin Kaepernick refused to stand for the national anthem, or because a defense manufacturer located in California donated to a Democrat. But why did this happen? Why are we here? Why do we have outrage culture? And I am not an expert in this by any means. I'm just a firearms instructor, internet shit talker, an occasional writer. But I think a lot of it has to do with people don't feel like their voice matters by itself anymore. Because one of the interesting things about the internet that it's done is it has shown a lot of people how insignificant their voice is. And it's shown a lot of people that no one's really listening to you and no one cares about your opinion. But if you find enough people who have the same opinion and are willing to shout it on Facebook and Twitter, well, then you feel like your opinion matters again. And you feel like the people are listening to you because you were loud enough and there were enough of you that were loud so that you could make your opinion matter. And outrage culture allows people who feel disenfranchised to feel some sense of power and some sense of control over a world that's largely out of your control entirely. I know my world's largely out of my control. And by giving people that sense of power and that sense of control, it reinforces. The first time your outrage is successful at getting someone canceled, the first time your outrage is successful at hurting a business, it just makes it more powerful. And I've been in the firearms industry for a longish time. And I remember the very first one of these that happened, in my lifetime was Jim Zumbo. And if you don't know what happened to Jim Zumbo, you should go and you should Google it and you should look it up. But what he did was he called AR-15s terrorist rifles, I believe were his exact words. It's been so long, I don't remember. And people were upset by this. They felt like he was betraying the Second Amendment and betraying gun owners by essentially siding with the anti-gun forces and agreeing that people shouldn't have AR-15s. And he lost his job over that. He was fired from the magazine that he wrote for. He lost a tremendous amount of money because people wouldn't hire him to freelance and that sort of thing. And it's funny to me now because I look back on it and I heartily supported it. I joined in on it. Fire Jim Zumbo, I said. Rah, 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 rah. I rabble-roused with the best of them and the loudest of them at the time. And I look back on it now, older and hopefully a little wiser, and I regret that. I don't agree with what Jim Zumbo said, but I don't know if he should have lost his job over it anymore. There are some instances where I think the outrage is justified. Another notable example going back in time was when HS Precision hired Lon Horiuchi to be a spokesperson. If you don't know who Lon Horiuchi is, Google Ruby Ridge. But the long and the short of it is Lon Horiuchi was an FBI sniper who shot an unarmed woman in the face. And I think that a precision rifle stock manufacturer using him as their spokesperson is really fucking tacky. Yeah, that one, I got nothing for that. I still think that him getting fired, I don't think he ever should have been hired by HS Precision. And there's been continued cases of outrage throughout the last several years, whether it's whether it was over Troy Defense or Jerry Sy at Recoil, and it's just seemed to have gotten worse and worse. And people now are screaming to the heavens about things they don't even understand. They don't understand how lobbying works. They don't understand how PACs work. Some people don't even understand the difference between an employee donation and a corporate donation to a candidate. And yet, this cancel culture, this outrage culture has infected everyone because it makes people feel like they have a voice. It makes people feel like they can affect the course of events and affect the course of big corporations simply by being angry. And I think it's incredibly dangerous and it's incredibly toxic, because what it causes us to do beyond just being outraged is it minimizes real instances of bad behavior. So let's say you're mad at Surefire for donating money to Dianne Feinstein. All right. I don't like Dianne Feinstein. I think she sucks. All right. Of course she sucks. She's one of the most anti-gun senators on the planet. Of course Dianne Feinstein sucks. If she got unelected tomorrow because we found out that she's a soulless harpy from another dimension, great. Wouldn't surprise me either. But if you're mad at Surefire over that, that's not really a good thing to be mad over. But we get tired of all of the outrage. You know, if you're not involved in the outrage, you get tired of people constantly being outraged, and you see it over and over and over again, that you start to get numb to it. And you get numb to it to the point that when real things happen that you should be outraged over, you don't care. I wonder, actually, where was the outrage over Cody Wilson molesting a child? You didn't hear a lot of that. That's something we should have been upset about. A leading figure in Second Amendment advocacy turned out to be a child rapist. We didn't really get mad about that, and we probably should have. We probably should have condemned that. You get numb to this outrage. If you're mad at Benchmade and you're mad at Surefire, you know, what's next? Who are you going to get mad at next? I mean, probably me for saying this, and I'm fine with that. That's my job. But we're at such a point where, what if something actually bad happened? What if we found out that, let's think of an example. What if we found out that Glock had, behind closed doors, signed a deal. Fast forward, hypothetical situation. Trump loses the re-election in 2020. Glock signs a deal behind closed doors to get their guns all the federal government contracts in exchange for assisting to push gun control legislation out through all their customers. You know, something like that. Something similar to the bad deal that Safety Hammer signed with the government back when they owned Smith & Wesson, which, interestingly, that Smith & Wesson deal, there are people who are still participating in outrage over the Smith & Wesson deal with the Clinton administration, despite the fact that all of the people who are involved with that deal are not involved with Smith & Wesson anymore. They're dead. The company was sold twice since then. So you guys can forgive Smith & Wesson now and move on. But that would be something that we should be upset about. A wholesale betrayal of our Second Amendment rights to win some government contracts. That's worth being upset about. And it's important to understand the difference between that and a couple of donations here or there, or trying to get business done to make a better product. And that sort of brings me to the last thing. And this is something that's come up on some other podcasts that I listen to, is that the other big problem that we have with cancel culture is, what's the way back? Let's say that, let's use Smith & Wesson as an example. There are still people holding a grudge over that. Just like I said, there are still people holding a grudge with Ruger over what Bill Ruger said about no honest man needs a gun that holds more than 10 rounds or something like that. Why? These companies have done more to further the Second Amendment since those mistakes were made than the angry people who are holding a grudge about it ever will. So what's the route back? In cancel culture and outrage culture, especially on the mainstream, these people will lose millions of dollars or their jobs or their careers for things that are for 10-year-old tweets and silly jokes. And what's the route back? Where's the path to forgiveness? And that's the important thing. That the last thing that I really want to talk about is that if we are going to be outraged, one, we must select appropriate targets for our outrage, and two, we must be willing to forgive. There's no point in being mad and holding a grudge forever. It doesn't help you as a person. It doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help the Second Amendment cause. Just holding a grudge forever against some company because they did something you like is silly. It's a pointless waste of energy. Why are you expending emotional currency on that to this day? What's the path to forgiveness? There has to be one. Otherwise, all of this is pointless. If we say that we're using our outrage and our anger to hold companies accountable for bad actions, we must be equally willing to forgive them when they turn away from those bad actions. And I don't see that. I'm sure that people will bring up Surefire's political donations 5-6 years from now in a Facebook thread or whatever's replaced Facebook, because I still see comments about Ruger and Smith & Wesson to this day. At the end of this video, it's not going to end on a hopeful note, guys. I'm very concerned about outrage, about the outrage culture. I'm concerned about its effects on the gun industry. I'm concerned about its effects on free and open discourse, because if you're worried about being shouted down because you hold a controversial opinion, then why even bother? It's troubling to see this spread into the gun industry. Next episode of Gun Nuts Radio, we'll discuss more topics, and we'll have a segment called Gun of the Week. Until next time, I'm Caleb Giddings. I'm a registered Democrat. Thanks for watching.